idea of a craftsman in a home, we're usually talking about the contractors, the people who swing the hammers and cut the actual lumber pieces, install the concrete and the trim, things like that. When it comes down to the brainiacs in construction, they're usually going to be thought of as the engineers. When it comes down to the artists in construction, we're talking usually about the architects. And the idea of this video is to really try to marry these three different perspectives to give us this ideology around really composing a house rather than constructing it, rather than designing it. Because when I think of a composer, and when hopefully many of us think of a composer, we see someone who is in tune with the various entities that are involved with making this song, and they are guiding it masterfully. And that's the idea, building yourself into the composer. And the idea here is that you will understand various components that make this performance just the best quality in terms of the actual sound, the aesthetics, and just the smoothest process in terms of keeping everyone in sync with a lot of things. And this idea is, it's really just having a helicopter view on a project, a true helicopter view on a project. And it feels more accurate in terms of this description as a composer rather than something like, per se, like a project manager or something like that, right? Because there's kind of a cut and dry business element to it, but not when you're intimately involved with a project. You probably would consider yourself more of a composer than an actual project manager in general. Now, and the idea here of a composer, I think the real difference here in terms of any of these roles is that they're intimately involved in the project, of course, but also and around the surrounding pieces of the project, of the building in general. Particularly, like, we're thinking about the site, right? And this is really a factor that's commonly neglected when it comes down to projects, right? Questions like, should you tell the grader to save certain trees or vegetation, and that could later be used to prevent erosion, or just become a beautiful addition in the back, or contribute to a beautiful addition or a beautiful backyard. And will the building site allow for building materials to flow to and possibly from the actual home itself? And how will just the elements, the outside elements, disrupt or harmonize with the actual project itself? These are important things. These are important things that have very real impact on the quality of a home. And the blueprints, I would say, it can be synonymous with the idea of sheet music. And without an understanding of how contractors or suppliers utilize those blueprints, a lot of contractors in particular, they'll improvise. Okay? And I've seen this so many times, right? Because lumber companies and framers, they can easily become the architect of your project, or somebody that's literally employed by them will become the architect on your project, basically, for this particular segment of the home. And it can get very extreme, and surprisingly extreme at times, so you have to watch that. So this idea is like, it can become dangerous in terms of not understanding things like, especially when these guys unknowingly step into the role of an engineer and just completely make a mess out of things. I've inspected houses where they just don't know. They don't know what moving that wall 5 inches really did. They really don't have a clue. And I have a perspective that's, it's based in it's based in engineering and the actual contracting, and you don't get inspectors like that on the site a lot. But I will tell you this: it can get very bad very fast if you have someone just make a decision to do something, and they don't know how that impacts the entire house, and that could, like I said, just completely disastrous. And the idea here is that I don't want you guys to be ashamed when it comes down to spending time, or to really get an understanding of this project, and possibly even consulting on a project, and that can save you a lot. Like, this is where you get bang for buck, right? Getting that sheet music can be a very instrumental piece, right? It can be something like a lot of people, they think about, hey, let's just wing it, and that can lead to very serious delays, and this stacks up tremendously when we're talking about just the amount that could be really just drained from a person, and change orders, the amount that could be drained from a person from the actual loans, like if you're taking out a loan for to actually build the house and to get the construction under, and you have to pay interest on a particular loan before it's actually built, or before it's actually sold in a lot of cases. But time is money anyway. But when it comes down to construction, when you're in the midst of actually constructing, it can be instrumental, right? You can purchase the land for the home, but when you start constructing, usually if you're taking out a loan, you're gonna make a consistent payment, as if you're paying that house. Like, it's not like it can add up. It's just way more expensive, but it can also just add up tons if you have to leave that site without any work being done for months on end. So take your time and really get consulting, I would say, from people who want to teach you, right? Not people who, you need to be careful about that. There are a lot of people who are maybe like architects, and they have really fancy, nice offices, and their goal isn't to teach you. Their goal is to make you feel like they are beyond the value that you are giving them, or they're trying to sell you themselves. They're not trying to make sure that the home is of the utmost quality, and that you understand that what needs to be done in a lot of cases. So that's an insider, but you really do need to understand that. And when you're thinking about whether someone's being straight with you, or if they're just trying to make themselves look better, or a lot of cases they could just be horrible communicators as well. So you do have to take that into account. But a lot of times they are just simply trying to. I've heard people talking this ivory tower language, where they speak with very fancy language to explain something that could be put very simply in terms of layman's terms. So watch out for that. But other than that, don't be ashamed to don't be ashamed to reach out to somebody and be like, hey, could you maybe look at this project here, and try to outline a scope of work for these people, because the more that you sound like you know what you want, the easier it is for someone to come in, and that's something really, really huge, and that can also save you time. Just line out their scope of work. Also, you need to, like, when it comes down to taking that time and designing blueprints, it adds up in terms of the value of your home. Like, you not only do you save money, you can add value to the actual end product. And that's what a lot of people don't quite realize, the value that you can put into a project if you just sit down with it and start to understand the components, or you sit down with someone who can help you understand components. In any case, you need to be able to answer the question of why components are in the place that they're really in, in the place that they're in, and understand those in terms of actually getting to the position of being a composer for a project. Okay, because when it comes down to, for instance, the structure and the exterior, right? That's where homes really start, or the construction really starts, right? Other than the actual site itself, you're talking about, brick, siding, shingles, concrete, the steel, and the lumber. But you should understand why these things are being used and what they're really adding to the project, and when you can possibly substitute, one for another, or when you learn the fundamentals, you can take your knowledge and you can learn it. You can take your knowledge and utilize it in another place, right? When you understand the fundamentals of why something works. Very interesting note here is that bamboo. I had a manager tell me one time that a bamboo can replace rebar in certain situations, and when you know why a rebar is where it is or what it does, then you could start to kind of basically see if those things are true, right? Like, I'm not saying that you can ubiquitously substitute rebar for bamboo, but I can say that I would know that I would look into that option and try to understand whether that option can be, something for future in the future. Also things like, when it comes down to structure, like my background is heavy in structure, and that is, I'll tell you what, like, when it comes down to, like, just walking into any place, like, I can just, my brain can instantly go to, well, how can we chop this place up? How can we open this place up? What can we do here? And this is, of course, when, like, the sheetrock's off and I can see, like, the ceilings or things like that, and where things are being braced and, stuff like that. But that is such an important element when it comes down to, especially, like, renovations. You're trying to save a project. You don't want to spend a whole bunch of money in terms of actually, like, going into, like, an old home. One of these, like, I'll call them, like, ivory tower architects or engineers. They'll come in and they'll tell you, oh yeah, this floor is sagging. It looks like it all needs to, you probably just need to just tear out the entire floor. And they wouldn't, like, even think about, a lot of cases, what it means to, like, okay, if you go into the crawl space or something like that, or we can kind of see what is making the floor sag, like, where is the load coming from, and tracing, it's called load tracing, but they won't do that for you. They won't do that for you because they aren't invested in the project like that. They need to make sure the project is worthwhile for them. And a lot of cases, I'll tell you what, like, if you're a homeowner, a lot of cases, I'll be honest with you, I've seen homeowners just be completely ignorant. Like, they'll get something and they won't understand that they're getting a special service, and they won't have value for your service. And anybody who I'd work with in general, they'd learn very quickly that, like, okay, if you're going to be somebody who's basically just completely ignorant, I won't do anything outside the scope of work, and I'll make sure that you understand that I don't even want your business at that point. that's really a tremendous thing. Like, you don't want to be a pain when you start learning all this stuff, right? When you're a composer, you're not trying to be a pain to the suppliers. You're not trying to be a pain to the contractors. You're trying to be a firm person with them in terms of what to expect out of them, and to be no nonsense in terms of the actual contract, right? And that requires more than appearance, more than you trying to project an image of, I know what I'm talking about. They've talked to a million contractors. They know if you know what you're talking about. It's like don't try to talk them into believing that you know what they're talking about, or don't try to just yell at them until you get what you want, because that at some point you get a change order after they're off they got their money, they get off that site, you get a change order. It's just like, hey, look, actually this right here, we still need that. All of a sudden you're out on however many thousands of dollars because you decided to try to cosplay as someone who knows what they're talking about. Like, you want to be careful about that. So very interesting and just important in general. Another thing is, in terms of understanding the components, you should understand plumbing, mechanical, and electrical, right? And they call this MEP, right? Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, in that order when they say MEP, right? And that is like things like when you talk about MEP, like, for instance, me, I'm structural heavy. I understand. I have I've gotten the combination license to combination inspection license to inspect homes for those things, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And I understand, most certainly more than the average, but I wouldn't consider myself knowledgeable on the products that make these things, but I know what I want, right? I know that when it comes down to toilets and showers, I want my toilet to flush strong, in terms of, I don't want it to just simply slowly carry away water. I want it to flush all of the water away. I want my shower to be a strong pressure, or my faucet to be strong and pressurized when I need it to be. Okay, those are things that I look for. Those are things that I'm constantly trying to figure out if this works or if this doesn't work. When it comes down to plumbing, when it comes down to mechanicals, I know I want a comfortable indoor environment. I know there are a lot of moist basements, right? Basements with a lot of moisture in the air, right? So, and I say a comfortable indoor environment, that's not just the actual temperature, the actual moisture composition of the air inside the home, in terms of that circulates inside the home, versus where the home is at and things like that. So a comfortable indoor environment is more than just saying, oh, the AC needs to be blasted or things like that. You need to understand where moisture buildup can happen and try to avoid that and try to fix that, in terms of when you have contractors coming on site and stuff like that, so you don't call them back twice or 3 times and end up missing out or having to spend way more money. Also, things like electricity. When it comes down to electricity, you need to understand, sockets, plugs, where are my lights, what kind of lights am I going to have to, put in, what are those things. And I'll say this, electricity is there's not as much emphasis. I don't put as much emphasis on, I need to know where things are, but I put, in terms of the lighting, stuff like that, those things are very important, especially architecture. But you can more easily change electrical than you can mechanical or plumbing, especially plumbing, I'll say. But plumbing is probably the most important, and then mechanical, in terms of things that can be actually moved around. Those things, sometimes you just can't do anything with the plumbing. It's literally can be, or not literally can't do anything with the plumbing, but it'll just be, you're basically building a new house. If you are not building a new house, you're basically digging out the foundation of a house. And plumbing sometimes, so you gotta watch that. But those are things that you you want to make sure you don't hit a point of no return. So having a helicopter view when you have different contractors on site in terms of how they're starting, how things are bridging to them, how the project transitioned to their trade, and how their trade needs to transition to the rest of the project to get the end result. Very important that you think about that, and you're able to really be the person to connect all the pieces. Another thing is sheetrock accessories and appliances. Now, if you don't understand how preceding steps would affect them, you can easily be disappointed in the product, right? You can think that everything's going smoothly with construction until you get to the end and you're trying to say, oh man, what happened to like my, why wouldn't I be able to get like that particular countertop here, or why can't I get like the special cove lighting or something like that without, what's the problem? And you start to realize like, oh, okay, I've made mistakes, or not I've made mistakes, I didn't know that mistakes were made, rather. I didn't know that these things weren't being tended to. I didn't know that my blueprint didn't say those things. Those are important factors to really have in the back of your mind as you see contractors coming to and leaving your particular site. Just going back to the idea of a blueprint, this comes into play. Like that blueprint, that time spent studying your blueprint, understanding the blueprint, or not really understanding the blueprint, but understanding and learning more about the blueprint rather. It can save you time and money, but it can also add value to your project. You can start to just understand various ways that you can make your project even better, make your project worth even more with some very small add-ons and additions. Because when people come to a site, if you ask them to say, hey, look, I know this is on, this is, the current plan that we first sent to you, but we modify things a little bit. So, or we're trying to see if we can modify things. Can you price me out for, adding this much to the foundation, right? Adding, this amount to the lumber package. That's where you save time. When they have to come back out there, if they have to come back out there and then, to quote you on it's a new project at that point. It's not the same coming back out there, right? Those guys don't just come out and just, like, oh, we already, you guys already paid us for, XYZ, so we'll just go ahead and do. No, it's, okay, we're coming back out here again. We're going to have to, I'm going to have to make sure that I have the trucks and everything ready for this particular new project. It's going to cost you. So make sure you understand that. Now, as I said before, I have this perspective on construction, and my perspective in terms of just how I got to where I'm at in construction now is more so. And by the way, I'm a designer, and I like in terms of architecture and engineering, but the reason why I call myself a designer is because I have a really high expectations for people in terms of the idea for engineering in general, specifically architecture as well. But I've seen people with professional stamps that fall so well short of my expectation. It is ridiculous. And if I decided to claim their level of expectation, then I can easily call myself an architect and an engineer. But I still hold those things. I still hold value to those things in terms of how those things go and what you can really get from. And there's still some excellent engineers out there, some excellent architects out there that really do some good work. And I still think of them when I try to claim a title for myself. So I call myself a CAD designer, and but I do understand. Like I don't have formal training. I don't have schooling, right? I came through the construction industry from my family contracting business to lumber companies, to the lumber, to the truss companies, lumber companies, to the engineering office, where I kind of developed developed by talking to all these different people, like architects, developers, contractors, of course, and just various different suppliers, companies, things like that. Now, I want you guys to understand something, that this is, I'm making this particular video as really just a kind of a gauging process. If you would be interested in possibly taking a course that I would offer, you can sign up through the Google Forms, and I'm really trying to see if it would be really worthwhile to create this particular course right now, because I understand that there is, like people, there's a lot of value, and I think someone who doesn't really, who simply wants to teach to improve the quality of building, and I don't see it as a lot of other people see it. I don't see this as my butter and bread. Like, if I teach you, then now I'm no longer able to. I'm teaching myself out of a job, basically. Like, I don't see myself in that particular role. But I do, like, in terms of this idea here, I'm going to start and keep really developing videos in my free time, and if you do sign up, then I'll send a monthly newsletter with any type of videos that I created, and that'll probably be it, unless I actually develop the course. Then you might get 2 emails in a month. But if anything, like I said, I really just need to gauge interest right now, because I prefer not to go back to working for a lumber company at this particular point, and really try to get into, like, actually building my own projects. I want to create my own individual, have my own ideas for what type of projects that I'd really be interested in, and I'm really more passionate about that. So I'd really like to focus on those things. If anything, a course could most certainly be the best case scenario, and if anything, I want you guys to know, like, you can always, like, follow, like, and comment if anything, and that is great support. It's also a great indicator that I'm providing valuable content and that I should keep going. And also this idea of as I make videos, like I said, I'm going to be making videos in my free time. I'm going to try to do it consistently. But if I don't make videos fast enough, I really do encourage you guys to look around and learn, right? There's this concept, there needs to be an understanding. Like, there is so much readily available information that people don't realize. Like, I like to say that the internet is the Library of Alexandria, and most of the populace is just stuck on the commercials. Okay, so if you really look around, you can find some things. But I will say that I was that guy. I looked around, I found a few things, and I got some really good knowledge. I got some few pieces. This was like back in 2015 or something that I was looking around. So 10 years ago is probably different than it is now, of course. But some of these guys, still, you need to understand, this is the construction industry. If you're trying to learn more about construction, don't get mad that people don't don't get frustrated with the sources that you run into, because a lot of people right now, they're not really in construction because they're the best communicators in a lot of cases, and I speak from experience because that's how I learned. I had to learn through people who could not communicate. I had to really bang my head against the wall and extract information, I'll say. But you want to at least look and see what's out there for free, so you know and you have an idea. Honestly, I'd prefer it even for people who take the course, because it's just like, now you know what value that I'm providing when you actually look and you try to find something. And that's probably the best thing. And also it also tells me that you're actually going to this is going to mean something in terms of the course to you, right? Like, if you are encouraged enough to go out, or you're to start looking at things with whatever free time you can afford to spend on it, that tells me that you really care about learning, and that tells me that this stuff is going to really translate well to you, right? I don't like the idea of teaching. I'd rather teach 100 people who go out and build beautiful buildings, and rather than 1 million people who just go and work for the cookie cutter developers trying to do what they do, or trying to just make a quick buck. And also this idea of, let me see, if in terms of this particular course, you learn about blueprint etiquette, creating blueprints, right? So the transition from somebody who doesn't know blueprints, whether that be somebody who's on site or just an interested homeowner, you start to learn about blueprint etiquette in terms of what makes a good blueprint, what makes a bad blueprint, but also things like the site, what goes into creating a site, what you can do with the site, the grading that goes into creating a site as well, but in terms of how you can kind of manipulate things for your particular project. And also of course the structure, the mechanical, the plumbing, the electricity, and also what goes wrong and why, right? Because it's important to understand when, like, what happens on site, right? Because these usually, like, there's not going to be a unique mistake that you would make on your project. These are mistakes that are just made. Usually it's a mistake that's made that's very common in the industry, that someone who is new to construction will make, or new to not construction, but new to actually trying to, I guess, manage a project or do anything new with the project. So look for, those are the things that I would really think those are kind of the categories that I'm thinking about really teaching on. And if anything, I can you can reach out to me and we can work out some kind of, if you're working on your own individual project, and we can kind of work on some kind of consultation or something. And either way, just try to have a scope of work. That's probably the best thing in terms of what you expect out of the actual, any calls or consultations or anything like that. And I'll tell you if I can fulfill the scope of work, or if you're better off somewhere else. And if anything, that's going to be it for this video. Please comment with any type of videos that you'd like me to make in the future, and I'll be happy to take a look at it. I can't make any promises if it's if it's something that I don't have special knowledge or special interest in terms of actually learning about that particular thing, but I'll look at it at the very least, I'm sure. In any case, have a great day.